Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of Keep the Mic On. I am Simply Cherry. I am one of your hosts, and if you have been with us at all in the past year and a half, you know what we do. We come out every week and have a conversation with an artist, each one of us individually. Um, every quarter or so, when there's a fifth Sunday, all four of us will come together and interview one artist. I'm going to say this up front due to a last minute emergency. Our fourth member, Charity Blackwell, could not be with us today. Everything is fine. She just had something come up and just couldn't make it tonight. But we will definitely give Analysis, our feature for this evening, the full interview. I am going to pass it to the one, the only, the amazing Girl Genius.
As soon as I unmute myself, hey everybody, I'm Girl Genius. My week is for Let's Talk About the Book, where I interview authors about their writing, their process, and all that good stuff. So it's not my full week. That's next week. But today you'll get the truncated version. They're in our fifth week interview. And I'm excited about our guest for this evening. So I am very, very happy to be here. And I think that's where we are for the moment. What I'm going to do, I'm going to keep it short and sweet so we can just jump right in. I am going to pass it over to one of my favorite people and one of my favorite poets, and therefore I call them one of my favorite people poets, and that is Kaniki J.
I love it. I love you. Thank you very much. I am Kaniki Jakarta, happily serving a 3-year term as the first Black Poet Laureate of Alexandria, Virginia, getting my connection together while on the road, because it doesn't matter. We still always have to keep the mic on from wherever we are. Thank you very much for joining us streaming. Hello to the people on YouTube. Hello to the people on Facebook. We have an awesome special guest for tonight. If you have been with us all the time, we have called him our silent male member. However, I think we have changed it now to our shadow male member. We say this is a women-led collective, but I have Analysis is one of the people who have been supporting us since from day one. He has actually been advertising us along with all of his other platforms that he has as well. He is an awesome person and an awesome poet. So he is definitely one of the favorite people poets, like Girl Genius was saying earlier. We didn't fight over him. We knew from the beginning that he need to be on this entire platform with all of us. We were just trying to figure out when would be a good time to bring him on. All of us wanted to interview him, but we knew that it would have to be a collective of things. And speaking of which, I also want to say that my week is called Poets and Platforms, where I interview poets who have platforms for the arts. And Charity Joyce Blackwell, who is missing for tonight, her night is called Art Plus Therapy. So we encourage everybody to come back and watch our stream every week. Tell your friends, your mama and them, this is where you should be at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. Okay, so I am going to kick it over. We probably have some bios and such, but like I say all the time, these awesome people, by the time we read the bios, it's expired because they've done some more stuff. And I think this is definitely true for this person that we are bringing in tonight. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Sherry. Who has a bio for this child? Okay, you have it. Unmute yourself.
Unmute.
There we go. Yes, I have tonight's bio, and I'm going to go ahead and get you two out of off the screen, and then momentarily I will bring in our special guest for the evening, who I want to also let everyone know and warn up front. Analysis is a good friend to all of us. He's the kind of person that you will sit and break bread with. So, Analysis is a veteran of various forms of public speaking. Oh boy, he's going to mess me up. I'm going to start that over so I don't have to hear about how I messed that up. Please forgive me. A veteran of various forms of public speaking, Analysis is a spoken word poet, rad minister and bookseller, educator and consultant, soccer addict and lover of justice and human rights. He's featured and spotlighted at venues across New England and the Mid-Atlantic. A background in civil rights and economic justice, anti-apartheid and anti-racism organizing, secondary education, justice theory and ministry, and international travel manifested itself into poetry. as does a love of radical history, family, and people in general. There's also a naughty side that comes out every now and then. A native of Baltimore, he studied public communications at American University and holds a Master of Divinity from Howard University, HU, you know, from which he graduated with highest honors. Analysis is the host of Red Emmer's Mother Earth Poetry Vibe, a quarterly open mic and feature venue of the theme Peace, Justice, Poetry that takes place at Red Emmer's Bookstore and Coffee House in Baltimore. He is a member of Simply Poetic Entertainment and Restoration Village Arts. His book, Somewhere Through the Haze, is a short collection of poems of variety, justice, and human rights topics. And his album, A Couple of Thousand Years Later, will be released later this year. Ladies and gentlemen, hello, Analysis.
Hello, Simply Sherry.
How are you?
I'm well, and since I missed it because my mic was off when you said it, I need to start it off by giving out a great big HU.
You know. So I'm going, you have been here every week with us, so you know what time it is. I am going to scoot off screen, and the mic is yours.
Thank you so much. And I apologize in advance for my weird sci-fi lighting here. I was trying to come in on a different device, and my lack of tech understanding prevented me from doing so, but we will take the light that we have and do what we need to do with it. I do want to give a trigger warning for our listeners that this poem is going to go to some places, and this will definitely touch on domestic violence and mental health and suicide issues and state violence. So basically this piece is going to go to all of the places. So please do exercise self-care as you need to. And tell me, when you kill her, what will it feel like? Will you delight in the touch of your finger against the trigger that dispatches death to one designated discardable due to her presence in an enemy combatant zone? Will you sense the softness of her skin as it's severed by your 762? Or tune yourself to the intonation of her aorta torn asunder, calling into question the caliber of your character as you chamber another round of red, white, and blues for an oppressed people to moan? In your fervor to hunt her husband and persecute her parents as you do what your bosses taught you, will you use the lessons offered down in Georgia at the school of torture? Will you gorge her or maybe torture her in her village because they had the misfortune of looking like this mysterious thing called the enemy? Or will you just fly the drones that terrorize towns and make for the stuff of nightmares as everyday folk shudder at the everyday chance of fire falling from the nighttime skies? And what of the children? What if their nighttime cries as their terrorized minds try to understand why another friend dies, why they grow up having to hide, when it will all end, when they will be next, when you rape her, what will it sound like? With the soul-chilling screams of her soul being snatched as your spoils of war stay with you long after your unit has moved on? Will you wonder if she'll be able to move on from the freedom the great Western saviors assaulted her with? Or how long it will take her to wash off the stench of your occupation? Is this part of the protecting? When you grab all you can and ride roughshod over God's other children, what of her children? Will your violations give volition to the violence they'll commit trying to process terrible shit done? PTSD, piercing their sanity deeply as it will yours. Exactly whose voices do you think they'll listen to next? Those that groaned in uninvited enjoyment of their mothers and aunts? Or those that whisper into their ear that they have nothing left to lose, so they might as well run kilos or strap 20 sticks to themselves and take as many out of this fucked up life with them as they can? You on that shit, ain't you? That drug of patriotism. Boosted by lack of opportunity and laced with the lure of adventure. As if you get to enlist in some real-life PlayStation, you feel it's your call of duty to strong-arm countries for your superiors. Sensing something is sour about the situation still, you stick to your Assassin's Creed, only to discover that the medal of your honor is sorely tested by the less than honorable role this country plays on the world stage. Thus, you find yourself in the company of heroes whose actions got staged by the system. You see, this is real life. You don't get any extra lives, just extra lies and extra ties to the gears of war, but this modern warfare can shred your soul into splinter cells, leaving you wondering how you lost your halo as you look back over the marred battlefield your life has become. You're so eager to put yourself at risk, like a little plastic piece on a board game. The board's a game for you to tame their market, so they roll the dice with your sacrifice and make sound nice the dicier parts of this life, all so that you can go and make the world safe for democracy. Or rather, safe for undemocratic regimes and corporate interests that don't work corporately with the people's interest. This liberation you bring them is paid for with high interest. I'm interested in knowing if any of this caught your interest, or were you uninterested in knowing, refusing to take a closer look at the ground truth before you hit the ground running. Yours not to reason why, yours but to do. A die coming up sixes for the ruler's tricks and snake eyes for your spirit's serenity. You say, it won't happen to me. And when it does, you can say you were simply following orders to aim high, and you did. Shooting low the hopes and dreams of people across the globe. So now you're a global force for good or for bad. You decided to be all you could be in the employ of the empire, but now you're searching for the things that made it all worthwhile and finding them few. The proud moments rare. Over there, you'll handle million-dollar machinery, but the machine back home doesn't handle you with trust, so it's a bust. You can return home to be on the front lines for your family's food assistance. I hope you don't return home cutting lines or wheeling in line at the VA looking for spare parts. Indeed, I just hope you return home. Look, I don't claim to have easy answers or a job in my pocket. Guess you figure there ain't much hiring. School ain't firing on all cylinders, so you say, why not? That's what they're counting on. People of color and poor whites to give themselves up to fight. Right. I know we all have service people in our families. We love them very much. We're very much loved for them not to be taken away from our families or to take others from theirs. I'm aware some of my own support branches down from the branches and from the making of arms, but that doesn't mean I can treat this at arm's length. So I'm arming you with ammo to make an informed decision before you choose to be uniformed into uniformity. This military industrial complex is making life complex. So at the risk of your being vexed, I offer questions you must consider before you consider the taking of others' lives or possibly your own. Will you own your path or merely march down one on orders to disorder another's? Young brother, I'm not trying to run your life or cause unnecessary strife, but I'm just wondering, when you beat her, what will she cry like? Will she shout shrieks of terror, shocked that the man she wedded is now wedded to embedding his fist in her, your bedding now a battleground brought home? Or, in hushed trembling, will she stream the slow, steady, almost quiet tears of a woman quietly resigned to this new prison of her life? Her personal Guantanamo, where she's force-fed fear, seasoned with memories of what used to be that keep her caged in a deranged domestic detainment. A part of you died over there, and you try to drink away the damnable parts that didn't, but all you cause is dread in a domicile where happiness is dead. Will you remember your happiness when you first knew you loved her? Her smile when you blew your first kiss? Now you've blown your bliss. Your blows don't miss. You've shelled all of this into a shell of what you had back then. Son, what of your children? Will your son learn from you how to disable an opponent, even one dearly beloved? He'll want to grow up and be in the strike force like daddy. Will he strike with force, like daddy, landing shells upon a woman he reduced to a shell? Will your daughter be shell-shocked into shelving her sense of self-worth and succumb to the hell some similarly sick bastard will sentence her to? Salute the God within before you salute the gods of war. And think on these things before you sign on the dotted line, just above the perforation of your soul, from its peace, recruitment.
Thank you, Analysis. And for everyone that is here this evening from Facebook and YouTube, if this is your first time here, and especially because you were invited by our feature this evening because he was having a good time this week advertising, we want to let you know that every week, as we mentioned, each one of us has a different focus and a different theme to our interview. So tonight is a perfect opportunity. You kind of get a taste of all three of our interviews. At the request, just as we ordered everything out for this week, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Kaniki Jakarta.
Kaniki J. don't think we can hear you, my dear. Is that my problem, or is that?
It's not. It's my problem. I was muted. You know what it is. It was muted. How you gonna keep the mic on mute? Can't keep the mic on mute. Right. Man, that was powerful, which it always is. I could ask you so many questions though, but I'm gonna stick to my platform situation. I'm gonna first ask you why the name Analysis. Let's start there.
When I decided to take a name, which was a couple of years after I had started into poetry, which was only about 13 years ago. So I was well later in life when I got into it compared to most poets. And I decided a couple of years into it, I wanted to take a name, and I thought about a bunch of names that I thought would fit me or reflect me and what I try to do with the art and some of my background and that type of thing. I had all kinds of things running through my head. I had like 10, 11, 12 names. I'm like, Brown, you got to settle on a name. You can't use them all. And I narrowed it down to two. One was African, capital A, small F-R-I, capital K, small E-N, playing on my name of Ken. And that's it's something I had come up with many years ago, more than 20 years ago now, when my book club was rotating back around to me, and I had us read Trisha Rose Black Noise, dealing with hip hop, and the hip hop style name came into my head. I have never recorded a hip hop song. Let's not get it twisted. Those are skills in terms of being able to put things on beat that I'm not sure that I have, but the name stuck in the back of my head, and I thought about that. And I thought about Analysis. I settled, of course, on Analysis. I liked its one word power. It's cutting edgeness, it's sleekness, and that type of thing. And I lived in New Haven, Connecticut when I got into poetry, and some of the dope brothers there who went by the name Influence, Concept, that type of thing. I liked the power and the way those one word names hit. And I kind of thought in that vein. I said, yeah, I think Analysis works for me.
I totally agree. I think for a long time I did not know what your name was. Like maybe a year or so, and I'm always one who wants to know what people's government name is. If I need to look for you, I need to know what it is that your parents had put on their birth certificate so I can find you. But
as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a secret about that. All the other names that I thought about using, as well as my actual name, as you say, my government name, various aspects of my career, my background, and that type of thing, I put them all into a poem. So if you've ever heard I don't know if you've ever heard my ID poem Analysis, my self-titled ID poem, but that poem is constructed of the other names that I was thinking about using, so I could so that I had a way to keep them dear to my heart since I had thought of them, as well as just other aspects of me, including my whole, Kenneth Russell Brown Jr. finds its way into that poem in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think it was a perfect pick. It was a perfect pick of name for you. Definitely. Awesome. Yes. So I want to talk about. Let me ask you this: how do you? First of all, I don't even know, number one, how you memorize all this. Everybody wants to know how you memorize. People want to know how you memorize poems. As poets who are coming to the mic, I know that your poems are very lengthy. So how is it what do you do to memorize them?
I think everyone has to understand their learning style. It's almost a self-pedagogical question, if you will. You have to know what got you through school or what gets you through work. We all have to memorize something, that report that we have to report on at work, or something that had to get us through school. And you have to know if you need to do something visually and draw it or some other way. For me, it's more of just the old school rote memorization. So after I finish a poem, and I don't try to memorize a poem until I think it's pretty much finished. It might be a tweak or two coming, but it has to be more or less finished before I start trying to put it in. And then I just have to go line by line, and run that line in my head 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 times, both internally and then vocally, because it can be in the head, but you have to I call get it in the mouth too, and get all the kinks out of the mouth, and line by line and line by line, and so I write in stanzas, as I guess many of us do, and so if let's say it's a new poem and I'm trying to get it memorized over the course of a couple weeks, if I can get a stanza in a day like that, then the next morning the first thing I need to do is hit that stanza fresh and see if I can pop it before I start on any lines in the next stanza. And so I just kind of chink it together and link it together like that. And at the end of that process, it's like ironing for me. There's always that wrinkle that's going to pop up, and you got to iron out again and iron out again. But at the end of that process, before I can perform it, I need to do it in front of a couple people. I need to call somebody or sit a couple friends down that I can go ahead and screw it up with. All right, y'all know I'm getting ready to mess this up, right? You know, get the bricks out, get the kinks out, and then I need to take it to a mic, but preferably your home mic. You know, go to the venue where it's your home people's and they don't mind you messing up. Don't try to slam it brand new first thing.
Right.
Or don't be on the Apollo stage. So no. Go to your comfortable home mic first and get comfortable with it, you know, first, and then you can take it up to the higher level.
That's great advice. Like go into the place where people know you and they know that you're already a great poet. I'm trying to hash out or iron out this new poem. So that's very good advice, because my next question was going to be, when you get ready to prepare a poetry set, do you prepare your poetry set? Because my husband and I, my husband and you are good friends, and he doesn't prepare poetry sets. I do. I have what poems I'm going to do before I go on. So do you, like, based on time, how do you put a poetry set together if somebody's featuring you?
I usually do think somewhat about it. I don't overly obsess about it, but I do want to try to keep in mind where I'm going. What type of venue is it? The first obvious question, is it an open topic venue or is it a specific thing? All right, the venue that I host is a justice venue. So somebody coming to me would have to send, if I'm going to, when I featured for Simply Sherry at her former venue, Heard Through the Grapevine, well, I know that's a love and erotica set. So obviously, those are obvious things you prepare for. But beyond that, I usually try to line up what I think I'm going to do, especially if there's a poem that I haven't done in a while and I really need to tighten it up and practice it. But there's also something to be said for feeling the energy, I think, at a venue and seeing what's going on. And there are times when, I've told the audience I hadn't planned to spit this, but the sister took me to places with her poem in the open mic and I got to back her up with this, that type of thing. So that happens also. I mean, your husband, which I hope all of my friends who are coming tonight and may not be familiar with my dear brother 13 of Nazareth, he has such an intuitive spirit and a feel for energy that it doesn't surprise me that he doesn't plan too much ahead of time, because he has that intuitive feel of energy and what's going on. For me, I think it's a combination of both. I do some thinking about it, but I do want to see what's happening and what the energy is in case I need to make a change. I haven't said, but I allow myself 1 or 2, feet of leeway.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's funny that you said that, because that's what he said. I feel, go out and feel the energy, see what it's gonna be, and then I do it. So that's exactly why he said he doesn't plan. So I'm glad that you brought up Red Endless, because as you know, my platform is called Poets and Platforms, where I interview poets who have platforms for the arts. So everybody wants to know, sir. I mean, you've been doing this venue for how long?
First one was in December of 2012.
2012, okay. And, 2012.
There's a bit of hiatus when Red Emma's was changing locations, and so the second one was in the spring of 2014, and I have been doing it with the exception of like 1 or 2 months because of logistics. Mm-hmm. I've been doing it consistently since 2014, since spring of 2014. Okay.
So in planning to do this, is this something that someone working there came to you to do, or did you propose this to the bookstore and venue yourself?
The collective came to me, Red Embers, for benefit of our listeners, and I do hope everybody has a chance to either visit it in person or at least on the website. But Red Embers Bookstore Coffee House is a worker collective in Baltimore that began in '04. It is a radical left, anarcho-socialist founded store based on democratic principles and worker ownership. So everybody on the team is either an owner or in position to become an owner. And so they approached me in 2012. I had just come back in town that year, but I had been a supporter even when I lived in Ohio and Connecticut. I found them about a year after they opened, and anytime I was back in town, I'd spend hours there because of just the ethos and energy and the conscious radical spirit. And so many books, I don't know how much of my library has been purchased from there. So they already knew me. By the time I got back in town, I knew them, and they approached me and invited me to establish some poetry. They wanted to establish a presence in poetry in the region, but they could not do that with just anybody. They wanted somebody that was in line with their ethos, and they knew me and I knew them. And I was very honored by it, and we were able to put something together. Our very first feature was Shahid Buttar, as a matter of fact, who just ran for Congress last year, trying to knock Pelosi out of her seat. But and we have been doing it consistently. Then after a while, I kind of fell into the realization that a quarterly venue, I think, from my standpoint, was going to be better than trying to add yet another monthly venue. And we've been doing it consistently since then.
Yeah, I was definitely going to ask you about the quarterly part, because a lot of people, a lot of artists, they're looking to start venues, but they really don't know like the ins and out and what should be done and what to charge. And so I asked you, as far as booking, as far as people that you book to feature, how do you go about selecting those people?
The challenge for my venue is that I'm not working with a whole lot of budget. Because of the difficulties that the bookstore restaurant already has, being an indie store and trying to stay alive. The store cannot afford me, a whole lot of line item and budget and that type of thing. So I am dependent on the contributions that I can get at a particular time in order to pay my features, which means that I cannot offer my features as much as I would love to give them, as much as we as poets know we deserve, and unfortunately have to take a little bit of a cut just to keep things alive sometimes. So usually it ends up being in the three figures in normal times. In pandemic times, as we've been online, it's even less than that, unfortunately. But so I passed the bucket in order to sustain the features. What that means in terms of feature selection is that, I can't fly anybody in. So many great poets out in the Midwest and West and down south, and other places that I would love to be able to fly in, but I don't have any plane money. So I am more or less limited to who can I put gas in the tank with, or a train ticket, an inexpensive train ticket. Now, we are blessed to live here in the DMV where we do, in the Mid-Atlantic area. So within a tank of gas, we have some of the best poets, in the history of the world, as far as I'm concerned, within a tank of gas of where we are in the Baltimore, Washington area. So I'm very blessed, in that it's been 5-star poet after 5-star poet who has been able to come. But I am logistically limited, budget vis-a-vis distance, vis-a-vis, recompense and so forth.
Interesting that you said that, because I know Talam was talking about that at one time. And Talam said, when he does, the smaller venues, he was able to, and this is maybe something for you to think about. He was able to, like when he did the college shows, he was able to coordinate with them. So basically the college would fly them in. And when the college would fly them in, then he would do their shows. So he would kind of coordinate with, I'll be. And so it's kind of like people asking him, when will you be in the area? So that way you don't have to worry about travel and lodging, because the bigger venue who has, $1,500 to $3,000 or so to fly you in and do it, I'm already here and I'll do your venue as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I have communicated with more than one artist about trying to hook that up, and either logistic matters did not permit it, or quarantine hit, or this, that, and the other, cog in the machine. But but I thank you for raising that, because I think that is something that all of us as venue hosts should keep in mind when we have the opportunity to do. If we can see that far enough out, and if the things align enough to do that, then that is certainly something we should keep in mind.
Yeah, and I mean, and really, artists don't ever slip on past the hat, ever, because I have gotten, like I would have charged, $200, and I've gotten $500-600 off of past the hat. You know what I mean? Like I mean, you never know what, and I mean, sometimes the audience is small. You know what I mean? It's like 50 people in the audience. You know what I mean? Sometimes the audience is small, and I mean, people are very generous with Pass the Hat, especially when analysis gets up there and say, hey, these people are coming for Pass the Hat, and the quality of people that he brings. This should not be a free event. With the quality of person that you're getting, and when he starts to read their bio, that he had to do a lot of work to bring these people in here, and they are very generous in knowing that you're in the presence of greatness here.
I would not be able to do the venue without passing the bucket, without passing the hat, because Red Emma's, by policy, we don't charge for events. Part of the ethos of Red Emma's is to be an info shop, a community salon, if you will. And so, because we're not charging for events, I don't have that $5, $10, $15 gate, per person gate to draw from.
Right.
So I have to pass the hat, and have to ask for the generosity of supporters.
It is amazing, and that the event is amazing. So, are you guys back in person yet, or are we still virtual?
Still virtual. I have not made the call on that for August yet. I will soon. I am leaning towards still virtual, and really letting things get right. The other thing is that Red Emma's is about to do a physical move again, and so I need to be able to line it up with the timetable on that. But even outside of that, just in terms of COVID safety, I would probably go virtual at least one more time. And for our listeners, I didn't even say when the venue is. We go on first Saturdays of February, May, August, and November.
Okay. And then how are we seeing that? What how are we looking at that venue? Is it Zoom? Is it Instagram? What platform are you using?
I've settled on Zoom. I tried Instagram. I tried Zoom. I think both have their advantages.
I wondered where you were because I watched it on Zoom before, so I wonder where you went.
Well, so the first virtual one last May was on Instagram. Then I believe I was on Zoom last August, and I was, as a matter of fact, and Instagram last November. And then this February, and then a few weeks ago, this May, were both Zoom. I've kind of settled on Zoom for it. I think both platforms have their advantages in certain things, either ease of sharing or marketing or promo, or controlling your room and coordinating. I settled on Zoom. I don't know how you feel about one versus another, but I think for having to choose one, settled on Zoom.
Okay. Now I'm gonna ask you a question about the host. If one is just starting a venue, what advice would you give a new host on how to welcome their features onto the stage? And not just the features, but the entire everybody who's gonna grace the mic for the night. So what advice would you give a new host?
For one thing, I would say be thorough in your advanced communication. Okay. Write out everything in your email. Okay. It is important that a guest artist be able to look at that email and see everything that you are talking about. Even if y'all talked on the phone, even if y'all just had coffee or drink last night and talked about it, you still emailed. I don't care if it's your partner and they live on the other side of the pillow from you. I don't care. You email so that you have a record of what was said, and so they have a record of what was said, and so they have an understanding of what is expected of them, of what you are offering them, or what you are not offering them. I think that's important, and particularly in my situation because it is a bookstore that I'm operating the venue out of. That brings its own peculiarities, be as opposed to a bar or a regular stage or what have you. Because a bookstore makes its money how? By selling books. And
Books, right?
so if a feature has a book, that feature is basically an author, just like any other author event. A bookstore has plenty of author events. What happens? The author comes and the bookstore sells that author's books
Right.
through the store. Okay. Um, we either ordered them in advance from the publishing house, or in the case of somebody who is moving their books indie, we negotiated what percentage of discount we get in order to sell them, 70-30, 60-40, whatever the case may be. All right. So a feature poet who has a book is also an author, event. That's also it's an author event. And
Right.
so I've learned more than once, and I try to do it every time. And sometimes it still takes hashing out and follow-up communication to get all the poets to understand how that works. But I have to make sure that poets understand the workings of a bookstore and the fact that in all probability, and there may be exceptions to a rule, but in all probability, uh, they're not going to be able to sell their book in the same way as they would at the bar.
Right.
Okay, that's the fact of
Exactly.
the bookstore. Even if we just take a little bit of a percent, but that it's still a different thing. So all of that has to be communicated upfront, in writing, uh, and make sure your feature understands that, especially if you have an unusual situation like mine. So that's crucial for any venue host. Make sure that you communicate in advance and upfront. I mean, there's a lot of things I think we could say about good hosting and what have you, but if I, in the interest of time, please advance, clear, in writing communication to your feature.
Yeah. Well, Dr. DuPas said yes. Over communicate. So yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So what I'm going to do, because I'll be asking you all the questions, right? So I'm
No, it's so
going.
much fun. We need like a whole hour with everybody. I love y'all. These my
Yeah,
people.
I
My
know the people, and my mom loves you because you make the best dips. She was like, yeah, anytime he made me dips and
bless
everything.
her heart. That hummus, that homemade hummus.
She
And
loved
dip.
that. She loves
Bless
that.
her heart. Hello,
Yeah, you
mom.
let
I
her
don't know
take.
if she's listening or not.
You
Hi,
let
mom.
her take. Yes, you let her take some home. I was like, Mom, how you get this? Oh, I got analysis. Gave me this. Yes. That's what she always say. Like, she loves you. She
I
loves you.
love it. I love it.
But what I'm going to do, in lieu of the absence from Charity, she had a question. So I'm going to let Cynthia Sherry jump back in and ask her question. And then we're going to keep on moving it forward.
Thank you, Kaneki. Charity has, just as we all do, we all have a set of questions that we all ask. And Charity's, one of major Charity's questions is always, speak of a time when someone has commented to you that your poetry has helped them or that has touched them.
Yes.
Charity segment is called Art Plus Therapy, which is where that question comes from.
And it is so, I'm sorry that she couldn't be here with us this evening. One of the reasons I chose recruitment was specifically for that and to discuss it vis-a-vis her segment, because among the greatest compliments I have ever gotten in poetry and really in life in general is when, after hearing recruitment, the piece that we did to open up with, the combat vets come to me with appreciation of that piece. And I've had vets come to me in tears to thank and pensiveness and pulling me close. I remember one time in Jessup, where I just gotten off the bike, and Jessup, Maryland, for our listeners. And I just gotten off the mic, and Latinx brother pulls me real close. I don't know what branch of the service he was in. And he pulls me real close and whispers in my ear, say, hey, bro, there's a lot of us walking real close to the edge right now. That poem helped pull me back from the edge a bit tonight. What do you even say? But it makes me almost tear up every time I think about it. Because if that helped give him anywhere from give him an extra measure of peace to perhaps keep him back from suicide that evening or anything else, then I'm more than humbled. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm thankful that my piece did that. And as I say, a number of combat vets have reacted to recruitment in that way. And I think the poem allows things to be said that they want to say, many of them, but for various reasons it's difficult, for them to get the mic or to be able to tap into that pain or to be able to phrase it a certain way. And I think the poem says some things for them. And when I wrote that, I had to make sure that I wasn't trying to be pretentious or fronting or wannabe, because I'm not a vet. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote it in the format that I did, in terms of talking to a young cat thinking about going in. But when the combat vets appreciate that poem, it means the world to me.
Okay, I thank you for that answer. I hope I did the question some justice for Charity. If you want to follow Analysis on social media, it is tagged here in our at the bottom of the screen. I've also just dropped into the comments his Cash App information and where you can purchase his book. Right now, I am going to step back off screen and give it over to the girl genius.
But there we go.
Genius.
Hey.
Hey, dear.
So hello. So we can discuss books all day, but I'm going to do the truncated version. That way, Sherry can get some questions in on the back end, and we still have time to take some questions from the people in the chats. So far, this has been really, really, really intriguing. So I'm happy to have you here. First of all, let's start with tell people the name of the book.
The book is called Somewhere Through the Haze. I took that name from a poem which is included in the book called Dream Fade, which is my getting out some angst about the way King specifically and the civil rights movement generally is viewed in a watered down and less than complete way. And I was thinking about a number of names of the book and bouncing it off people, some of whom are in this call. And I just decided to go with that, and it sits well with me. It sits well with me.
And you have another project, but this is an audio project, yes?
It's an audio project, and the title for that one comes from another poem as well. The title of that one is A Couple Thousand Years Later, which comes from a piece called Better Friday, from the closing stanza of that piece. Better Friday is my poetic, justice-oriented retelling of the crucifixion story. And so that is the line of that. And I guess just, generally speaking, both of these are indie projects. This is, indie book. I have not gotten it into the hands of any major publishing house or anything. First of all, it's small. It's a chapbook size thing. 8 poems. Granted, 8 of my length poems, but still 8 poems nonetheless. So I've moved it indie so far, and through Red Emma specifically, and of course directly from the printer Lulu, and have constantly debating if I want to try to take it into a major house, which probably needs to happen sooner or later. The album is an indie project, and you all heard Sherry mention in my bio a group called Restoration Village Arts. My dear sister and ministerial colleague and a singer-songwriter herself, Reverend Tracy Howard Whisperway, heads up a group called Restoration Village Arts, which gives grants to progressive artists of faith, progressive creatives of faith. I was blessed enough to receive both a residency to do the vocals and a grant from them to continue the project and complete the project. And so that will be out this year, thanks to their generosity. So the indie projects, but looking for those ways in which we can get them out and about.
Got it. I was gonna say I asked for the titles because Sherry, of course, dropped the links to both projects. The one for Red Emma's and the one through the indie publisher that's at the bottom. You're good. Everybody has it. They should be in here and in YouTube and or Facebook and YouTube. And so I encourage everyone to support your local bookstore and your local poets. I encourage that first.
And you can get it directly from me, folks, if you want. Just contact me directly. I'll autograph them, or as Girl Genius said, Red Emma's or Red Emma's within the United States, or bookshop.org within the United States, lulu.com within a number of countries.
Yeah. So I only have 3-4 questions for you. Like I said, I'm going to do the truncated version of this interview the way I normally do, because I want to make sure that we have time on the back end, so that if, after Sherry's portion, if people want to ask questions, that's always an important part of the process for me. It's not just for us to be the talking figureheads here. It's like everybody, like we want people to ask questions. So my first question to you is, who or what inspires your writing?
The world, as it is, such as it is.
That's an easy answer, though.
It's
Give me the hard answer. The world is the easy answer. Give me the hard answer.
I don't know if the revision of that answer is going to be harder, but it unfortunately is always true, because as someone whose wheelhouse is justice poetry, and as someone whose poetry is really an extension of what I was already doing in life, in terms of justice ministry, in terms of education and activism and so forth and so on, then that's where the poetry stems from. So we talked about Dream Fade, which is an examination of a historical period. As someone who loves accurate history and has taught it and is the son of a historian and so forth and so on, it makes sense that I want to look at that and draw from it poetically. As someone who, as we mentioned, is comes out of a background of justice ministry, of course I'm going to look at the crucifixion in a rad way and write a poem about that. So it really is, whether you look at ancient literature like that, or historical time periods, or life as it happens, such as the police murder of my nephew in 2007. I wish I didn't have such sources. Unfortunately, I do. When the selling of souls, spelled with a C, is about the prison industrial complex. Unfortunately, I have all too much material. I wish I didn't, but it's right there in front of my face. And so these are the things, these are the reasons. This is much of the reason why I write. It's much of my calling to poetry, and I think it really is a calling, a la ministerial calling. And so I draw from the things in those issues that affect me. And there are other,
But that's why I asked you. But that's also asked you why I asked you to give me the hard answer.
Mm-hmm.
I know this. I also know your topic. You're that you are well versed in a number of topics. But I know that justice poetry has always been your passion and the crux of a lot of your stuff, and that's why I asked you specifically to give me the hard answer. So
yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean, we're all human beings, so we're going to draw on a love poem or a little what you and the girls dubbed years ago my intelligent stupidity, what I call my little flirtatious poems and that type of thing. Poems about my family and that type of thing. So that also basically is just drawing upon real life, in a certain way, even though my wheelhouse is justice poetry.
Right. Drawing on life is sort of the natural a way to do this, like that everybody does. Everybody draws on some life experience. I just know that because you do that, I just know that, and I know you well enough to know there's some things back there that maybe others do not know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's dig into the process part of this. So I know you take on not easy topics, but generally speaking, even if it's no matter what it is, I always like to ask about what process looks like for you. Like, what do you do? What does your writing look like? Like, what does your writing time look like? Are you the person that needs to get up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and write the poems? Are you the person that needs to be 11 o'clock at night? Or are you the as it comes, let me find something to write on because I may not have a piece of paper at the moment? What does your process look like?
It can come at any time. In terms of the clock, that can hit at any time, and very often hits at the most inconvenient times. Driving along, when I'm on the weight room bench with umpty jillion pounds on my head, and it's like, why am I thinking about a line right now? So
I did that on the way over here. I did that on the way home.
thank God for the smart electronic devices that we have, where I can jot down, notes or speak it into the microphone or that type of thing. And that's often what happens. I need to jot it down so that I can come back later. All of this is either on computer or phone or tablet or something like that. I don't actually handwrite much of anything in life anymore. So I write right onto the computer. I think cut, paste, drag, and drop are the best things since sliced bread.
I still do a little both though, because I'm a little nostalgic, and sometimes like the remembering of things, the trigger for me to remember things is to actually handwrite.
Yeah.
But that's me.
And I feel that. I get that. And but a poem I don't write a poem linearly, in the sense that I always start at the beginning of the poem, and I will write for a certain concept or topic or line might be the kickoff. And so
it may not be the first line, and that line might not even be the first line. It might be in the middle of the poem somewhere.
Exactly. And so I'll build, and that's why I say drag and drop are beautiful things. They
are your friends. Drag and drop and yeah, or your best friends. Mm-hmm. Or your best friends. Exactly. I promise you, I am the person that starts in the middle of the page, and like the one line is not necessarily the first line, but it's the crux of the poem. Like, and then you build the how do we get here, and then how do we get away from here and back to the mm-hmm. beginning, right?
Mm-hmm. And the opening and closing. Now, I don't know about you, but the how that poem opens and how that poem closes are crucial, are cornerstones.
Very much. I have probably very little problem with opening a poem, but I have always had an issue with landings, because I feel like there should be closure, and with poetry sometimes you don't get that, but my brain wants closure. So closure doesn't necessarily look the same at the end of a poem, especially not when you're writing about something like heavy. Like, how do you put closure on something like a justice poem about somebody's murder? Or how do you put closure on, like, there isn't any?
It's difficult. Poem for Jarrell, which is about my nephew killed by police in Frederick, Maryland in 2007. I tried to, in its last stanza, after talking about the incident, which is much of the poem, after talking about it also in its secondary sense, kind of the subplot of the poem is the relationship between my sister and I, and how that the death of her son affected that. But in its final stanza, I try to bring it back more, to a forward-looking call for action. Let's do what we got to do. Let's change this, But it also ends with the crux of the emotional crux of the poem is that I miss my nephew. So that's why it ends with, and Yorel, short for Jarrell, I miss you. So for me, the closing of that emotionally, it does not close in my life.
Correct.
But poetically, for as far as poem structure, it closes with the basic emotional feeling of the things that I miss my nephew. It had anger at the police in it. It had love for my sister, has all these other emotions in it, but it closes with the foundational thing of, like, damn, I miss my nephew.
I have another question for you that's not on my standard list, but I'm just curious. Because you were talking about structure. So you write long poems. You write long form poems. And I wonder, and I will ask you, does that lend itself to, do you experiment with forms?
Sometimes. Something I want to play with more. I was just I meant to send it out to some of y'all. I just stumbled across a couple more sites. There's one site I found with like 170 poems, like, in detail describing what.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I keep saying I'm going to play with some more just for the hell of it, but it's not something I do often. Every once in a while, and basically the only forms I really play with when I do so are acrostics, and I'll do the occasional what I call true haiku, trying to force myself to, stick to the Japanese form. But I don't do a whole lot of, like, I've never tried a sestina. I've never
I would
tried
like to see, I'd be curious to see what happened if you did, because I feel like
I've written a sonnet. I've written like one or two sonnets, not many.
No, not. I'd like to see you play with a sestina, because I think that with the way you put words together, it would be really. I just think the results would be really interesting.
I would like to more, and I've said to myself, and it's interesting that you raise it again. I've said to myself that I'm going to block some more time to just dabble around with some forms and read up on some and play with some that speak to me. It's a fun challenge.
I do it all the time. I do it all the time I mean, of course, past haiku, because y'all know about that. But I mean, aside from that, I do a whole bunch of stuff with forms just because, and I make my own up. I will smash 2 or 3 together or do that. And I've talked about this before on the show. And I bring that up because I want sort of to emphasize that it's not, that it's, play out, get outside the box, play with some other things, have some new tools in your arsenal. And then if you never use them, at least you sharpen your skill set up, because, it's a good thing to play with. I just because I know your style, I would just be really curious to see what happens if you mess with a sestina. That's all.
Immigration acrostic, in terms of acrostic, is the first poem in this book. It was one of the first poems when I fell into poetry. Is one of my early writings, for 2 reasons. One, because of the subject matter, because I was doing some organizing against right-wing xenophobic hate groups, and also because I was trying to figure out my way in this poetry game, and I was like, okay, let me try form. Acrostic. Yeah. Let me try that, because I need to get used to this poetry thing. Let me try that and see what happens. And it's become a very popular piece. So.
Mm-hmm. Especially this drags into my next question. Thank you for putting in the rules for the sestina. This discussion drags into my next question, which is, I know you just did the audio project, correct? It's fairly new.
Right. Crossing T's and dotting I's, but it's in the box. It's in the can.
Fantastic. So aside from this, are you working on other projects? The original question was based off of talking to people when we were quarantined. We're on the back end of this now, so we have a little bit of outside available. Are you working on other things, or you just or right now are you trying to get this one, like, sorry, out there and out the door? I had the hiccups.
That's right. Yeah,
Drive me nuts.
Out there and out the door.
I have no wine fairy. This week because my in-laws are here. So
that's funny.
Yeah,
hello,
true
in-laws.
story. I have no wine fairy because my wine fairy is entertaining the in-laws.
There you go. Hi, in-laws. Yeah, right now I want to get the album done. It's behind schedule for my own mistakes and what have you. So I want to get that done and out. There are things percolate, but I need to push that domino down first in terms of the album. I have had in the back of my mind for some time to do a thorough examination via contributing essay on Better Friday, because I'm fortunate to have known and be networked with quite a few thinkers and scholars, on various topics that I think if they, if I let them loose to get into that piece and take various parts of that poem, so that when I reference water issues in that poem, let them break down their expertise on water issues, but then in relationship to the piece. When I mention, a various number of topics that come up in that particular piece, let them really get at it in relationship to the poem. So what you will have is an examination of a variety of issues, as well as a literary critique, a literary examination of the piece, to see how those two things work together for just that one poem. So I want to take that one poem, Better Friday. If y'all get the book, you'll see it's long enough to do that with.
Oh yeah.
Poem takes about 8 or 9 minutes to spit, but I want to let them loose, and get a number of writers, and let's look at that one poem in particular. And so that's been in the back of my head for a while. That might be one of the next projects, after the album.
All right. So I'm going to ask one last question before I pass it off to Simply Sherry. And it's the one I normally ask at the end of all of my interviews. I always like for people when they're on my segment to answer this one question, which is, what is your favorite book, your favorite author, or your favorite quote? Or you can answer any combination thereof.
And it's probably going to be some kind of weird combination because, of course, I know all of your questions. I know all 4 of y'all's questions, and that one I knew was coming. And weirdly enough, it's a challenging question for me, because I'm not sure I stand ready to die on the hill of so and so is my favorite author. There's just so many individual hits, particular books and writings that have hit so hard. If by trivia one wants to know which author do I own the most books of, it's actually Dave Zirin. My man Dave Zirin is a conscious sports writer based in DC, real rad, justice-minded sports writer, and I have all but about 2 of his things. But in terms,
they can be separate. I'm gonna say separate things are not the worst thing in the world. I have my favorite book is not my favorite book was not written by my favorite author.
Exactly. But there's so many things. Many people over the years, especially coming through the bookstores, as I push books into their hands, have and will always hear me talk about the late great Howard Zinn, historian whose seminal work, A People's History of the United States, must be on everybody's shelf. And if you all do not have that listening, I need you to get that this week. James Lowen's Lies My Teacher Told Me. So already I've named 2 history books, and I can continue on down with foundational accurate history. In terms of poetry, so many to shout out our sister Aja Monet, her book My Mother Was a Freedom Fighter. Stacey Ann Chin, as many of you know, put together her collection for the first time a couple of years ago, Crossfire, A Litany for Survival. And I could talk about our crew. I could talk about, all of our books and what have you. I certainly am particularly partial to a collection called Love Simply by Simply Sherry. I might have been part of the editorial process on that, but don't consider my bias. It's a good book, just because
I might have been.
Yeah, and that's why I said that. You and I are part of the editorial team on it, but we also think it's a book that we recommend. So I think our own crew, Lady Breon's, we can go on down the road, Sliced Chakras, our own crew, are some of my favorite poets, performance-wise, and some of my favorite poets, book-wise, and that's why I can't wait to get a hold of Rashid's new one. Clint has a new book out, a book of essay out coming out.
Does.
So,
I am gunning to get him. I am not. Well, we have a special person coming in next week, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But I am gunning to get Clint in before the fall, maybe.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
I was going to, I know we're going to talk about that later on, and certainly Clint was going to be one of those names I mentioned. But like you say, time forbids us to name all of it. But I just draw there are a number of seminal. I could think of plenty of foundational books that over the years, I thought to be phenomenal and that I've really highly recommended to people. And then just in terms of the recent years, since the beginning of last year, I've done about 13 things. So I'll try to, if I have time, I'll try to see if I can type them in. But otherwise, we'll get them to you later.
No, you're good. I'm about to say, I am going to pass this on to Sherry to do her segment, and that way you still have we still have a little bit of time left to do Q&A. Thank you. I'm gonna say this up front because that's where I'm at. I'm gonna say thank you.
Well, I want to let everybody know that yes, both of them did help edit both of my books. I do have a new one waiting to come off the printers right now. Also, if you have ever attended an event I hosted, Busboys and Poets, called the Pajama Jammy Jam Slam, this is my bout management team, Girl Genius and Analysis. So thank you. I just wanted to say that publicly, imprinted forever, that y'all have it. Thank you for all that y'all have done the past 5 or so 6 years that we've been doing this.
PJJ,
and hopefully one day soon we will be back in person. Bye, Girl Genius.
Bye. I'm still here. I'm listening.
I know. Hello, Analysis.
Hey.
So also for everyone, in all fairness, to my list of my questions, my section is called From Behind the Microphone, where we take times to get to know the poet behind the poems, because poets are people too. When I originally came up with the concept of this list, it's been 7 years ago now, Analysis edited the questions. So he is very familiar with these questions. So I would not be me, and it would not be my interview if I did not scrap maybe 1 or 2 of those and throw in some new stuff.
I knew that was coming.
So in your bio, you mentioned that you are part of Simply Poetic Entertainment. For those that don't know what that is, please do like 30-second elevator pitch on what is Simply Poetic Entertainment and your role.
The dynamic, enjoyable, love, sexy, classy, nasty fairy herself, the poet known as Simply Sherry, began Simply Poetic Entertainment as an umbrella concept to draw together all kinds of things that she does in terms of hosting venues such as at Busboys and Poets Tacoma Park and Busboys and Poets K Street, and all of the things that have been happening over the years. Certainly her productions, Love Simply, an excellent collection of love and relationship and mental health and being a Black woman in America poems. You heard her mention Freaky Darlings. I think that title is self-evident. And some of the special venues when we go out and do, for instance, the Harvest performances at locations, bringing together a multiplicity of artists. All of these things are Simply Poetic Entertainment. I strongly suggest that you go to simplypoeticentertainment.com, find that also on IG, and follow the things that Simply Sherry and her merry band of folks, such as Analysis and Girl Genius and everybody else, are into.
Okay. And we have jokingly said several times tonight that you are the Keep the Mic On shadow male member, the man behind the women. So what is it that you do? Because you do have a special role in this project that I'm not too sure that only people that have been here before would have noticed.
Well, besides just being supportive and trying to help promo and everything, anybody who follows me on IG or perhaps sees the cross posts on Facebook knows that every Sunday I post up who is coming to be interviewed, and I usually try to throw some silly witticism in there with it. But also, as a bookseller, naturally, I have an ear towards what the guests are saying as far as their reading is concerned, and especially in terms of Girl Genius's questions when she gets into the books and what folk are writing and reading. I try to pull some of those links so that people can see them in the chat. And I know that Genius and the entire team are in the process of compiling those things. so that we can see what people are reading. You know, I always recommend purchasing through an indie bookstore such as Red Emma's or an indie store of your choice. Bookshop.org is an overall U.S. thing that supports indie stores, because why give that oppressive 1% bastard Jeff Bezos more money than he needs? So that's something I like to do when we listen to our guests.
Okay. You mentioned in your bio, it mentions that you have a Master's of Divinity from Howard University, HU.
You know,
how has that influenced your writing and performance style, or not influenced it?
oh, it's foundational to it.
Mhm.
We've mentioned already tonight the idea of poetry as a calling, and usually when you talk about call, that is theological language and ministerial language, and I do see the things for me as being very, very related, intricately related. It's fascinating that I didn't get into poetry much earlier than I did. The fact that I was well into my 40s by the time I fell into this thing is interesting, because it is so much for me a natural extension of how I view ministry for really for all of us, not just for those of us who happen to be theologically trained, but for those of us
One
who
moment.
have an understanding of we need to live this life in such a way that we are trying to make this on earth as it is in heaven. If we have an understanding of that, then the arts naturally come into it. And so whatever one's artistic expression is, for those of us on this call, it happens to be poetry, that becomes a natural piece of that. You cannot separate that. I know Kaneki sometimes will ask the question, you know, do you see your poetry as part of justice? For me, that's a natural calling that I cannot separate it from. And so it comes through in my writing. You can scarcely read a poem of mine that's justice related that you can't sense some kind of justice praxis, justice theological praxis in it. So for me, it's very intricately related.
Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the traditional from behind the microphone questions. I wanted to give him some things that he didn't know I was going to ask him. So
Lord. Help us, Lord.
this is what happens when you're friends. Tell us the story of your first experience performing a poem, the first time you went into the venue to do the poem, how that went.
I was in New Haven when I really got into poetry, and I felt some inklings of it beforehand in keynote addresses when I used to be in the national offices of the United Church of Christ, and I do keynote addresses here and there. I can remember one or two where I kind of went off the dome with a few things. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Did I do that? I can remember co-emceeing an all-day concert at the Big Mother House of Blues in Chicago, and just to fill gaps between acts, I almost went off the dome there. This was in support of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, the grassroots tomato pickers organizing in South Florida. And I ended up not needing to, but I was fascinated. I'm like, did I almost try to go freestyle in front of 2,000 people? Did that really almost happen? I moved to New Haven. I was trying to just, meet people and everything. I went down to a poetry venue. I said, this might be interesting. And they were so encouraging, and good brother by the name of Bobby Don was hosting a thing called Grab the Mic, and he and other people were encouraging me, say, get on the mic and do something, do a poem. I said, do what? I said, do a poem. I don't have a poem. You just find something. And I pulled out a little brain teaser that I'd written for my office mates a few years prior, a little something made up of music titles, composition titles thrown together. And I read that, and they're like, that's a poem. And they're like, is it? And so, in short, the experience was eye-opening in terms of what is poetry and the range of things that maybe were in me that showed me that I may have the potential to do this thing called poetry, because I was like, I don't know what that is, so nerves a little bit, but I was already experienced public speaker, so it wasn't brand new nerves. It was just nerves of oh, now I'm trying poetry. What the hell,
Okay. This question is for your father, Dr. Kenneth Russell Brown, Sr.
He might be listening. He said he was going to try. I don't know if he is or not. He said he was going to try to listen in. Maybe not.
Hello, Dr. Brown. If you could transport yourself to any moment in history to be a witness, not affect the moment, not to change the moment, but to witness a moment, where would you go?
Fascinating. There are many things you might expect me to say in terms of major historical events.
Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about 20 of them. We don't have time. I'm going to choose something that is very family specific, in terms of my personal family. One of my great uncles drowned to death as a young man, long before I was alive, and the circumstances were never found out in its exact story. And I can remember my great grandmother talking about it, and she always suspected there was foul play, because she said James was his name, and she said my Uncle Jimmy was an excellent swimmer, and the idea of him drowning never sat right with her, and she always suspected foul play. And so you get points for that question. I wasn't expecting that at all, but offhand, I would love to go back and at least see what happened with Uncle Jimmy and his death as a young man, his drowning as a young man.
Okay. For those that we mentioned, I think Analysis mentioned his father is actually a doctorate of history. So if you could have I'm going to skip that one. Your perfect concert, 3 acts, living or dead. I know you've been dreading this question.
And the only reason I dread it, in case people are wondering why I would dread such a thing, I love the question. It's a fun question. I only dread it because that answer could be different every 10 minutes you ask me. There's so many people I would love to see. So right now, let's go with, I love the arrangements that Humphreys McGee puts together in their live concerts. The album cuts are great, but the way they arrange their stuff live is amazing. For those of you that are not familiar with them, Humphreys McGee's what they call a jam band, and kind of along the lines of Fish and Government Mule and those types of jam bands. I would love to go back to, let's say, mid to late 70s, early 80s at the latest, but let's say the late 70s, to the heyday of La Fania All Stars. So La Fania, Fania, were a group of Latinx artists who were really foundational in the creation of the genre salsa. All right. So salsa, as it's descended from mambo and son and other Afro-Caribbean things, in the late 60s and 70s, they started to put together the sound that we know as salsa. You're talking about Johnny Pacheco just passed on this year. You're talking about Ruben Blades, Willie Colon, Hector Lavoe, Celia Cruz, who I have heard live. I did hear live before she passed on. But all these folk used to do these major concerts together, if you can believe it or not. I would love to go back in time and hear that. And then let's just go back and say, let's pick any of Miles's combos. You could pick Miles's fusion combo, where as a matter of fact, in honor of Chick Corea, who also passed on this year, let's say we should go back and hear Miles's fusion combo with Chick Corea and those guys that he put out Bitches Brew and some of the fusion cuts with. I should have said Return to Forever for also, but we could go on and on.
I know you've been here all night. Do you have another creative outlet? And if not, is there something you would like to learn how to do?
Used to sing in choirs and chorales and what have you. And every once in a while that creeps back into poetry performance. But it's something that, I didn't pursue, as seriously as poetry now. But it rears its head every once in a while. I used to have, I still have it somewhere in the basement, my beloved Nikon 35 FM, old body, you know, with the film, and was really enjoying that and actually getting pretty good with it in the late 80s and 90s. So much so that I was thinking about getting into fashion photography. And through X, Y, and Z reasons we don't have time for, didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
But I miss shooting with a full rig. You and the whole crew well know that I always have the cell phone snapping away.
Mm-hmm.
But it is still on the list one day to get a whole nice new real rig. I know Rebecca Dupont and other photographers on the call now, in our chat now. I do want to get a nice new rig one day, especially now in the digital age, and maybe get back to shooting for real.
Okay. So my last question, and then you will do another poem, and then we will be opened up for audience Q&A. Borrowed from Inside the Actor Studio. If heaven exists, what do you want to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You finally began to fulfill the potential I put in you.
Nice answer. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've said before, we have one more poem from Analysis, and then we open for Q&A. Analysis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was half expected for you to pull out your usual line, put the venue under analysis. You know, I did that in some of our promo just for the fun of it. We mentioned earlier that even justice poets talk about a variety of things besides just the hardcore justice issues. So in that vein, let's do this. Laura dreams of locks, and I dream of Laura. Locked onto her aura, I am guided to her spirit like stars leading me through the Rift Valley. In my mind, there's no rift, and yea, though I walk through the valley of missing her, I fear not. For I sense her as I breathe in her strawberry-scented hugs brought hither to me on highland breezes. She is my Queen of Scots. The very thought of her makes me merry, and in this scene of lots of smiles because she shares her cheery disposition even when times are tough. Clearly, my position is that I can't get enough of her. For she holds my interest in rapt attention like ancient Hibernian lore harnessing my heart's imagination. Laura dreams of locks, a natural new adventure for her already enticing natural curls, which naturally entice me to curl her into me as we lay peacefully on the Linlithgow hill, lapped by a Lamu sun. Still, sweetly surreal, yet still so real that it reels my soul across the waters as if summoned to an intimate diasporic dinner for two. And so she has me wanting to go north, see her for the first time, again. Atlantic indicates not the distance between us as much as the depths of my passions for her. Thus, my passions traverse the depths that I might tear down Hadrian's wall just so she can be with me. Feel me run my fingers through her dark sienna tresses as she nestles into me, safe from the mad world. Unlike many in this mad world, she's not locked into some train of thought in which she thinks her wonderful train of twirls ought be forgot or changed just for approval sought. She is not bought into the lie which says her beauty is determined by others. Rather, she longs to explore the range of richness in her divine diversity and divine new verses for her radiance to sing. And like the winsome song of the pipes wailing over Indorama beats, I hang on every note, trembling at all at the treble of her loveliness. I want to be the bass on which she clefs, the orchestral accompaniment to the desires of her dreams. So let the cacophony of the world be left locked out as we lock onto the peaceful rhythm of our breath. She allures me a lot with the allure that does lock my gaze, and for days I am locked in a daze. Together we're tethered, locked deeply in phase, so sensually in sync that I have but to think of her. For mere seconds, and time and space suspend themselves as I dream of me and her, our bodies braided like twists, locked together as we lay by the lock, lost in the mist as we're lost in the midst of each other. No other cares could concern us as she coils herself around me, her legs locked about my lumbar as I lunge far into the thrill of her thirl. She thurls as I lower myself into her lowlands and lips lock on lips. Tongue sinks between hips, harboring me like the first of fourth. I feel her first, the second, her third, her fourth. She's in mirth, of course. In moans she reports as she sails these waves and sail, then rides my rise once more, rising in a rapture that captures for her every splendid sensation she so deserves. She deserves this, has more than earned respite from the daily fight her brave heart wages for what's just and what's right. She can take flight in me to faraway places, soft massages and warm, safe spaces. There will be no traces of the tensions that hound her. Burdens will be thrown off like stones as I surround her with equatorial affection. I've no intention of cornering her in any contrived confinement. Her lust for life and love of living it are too large to let anyone lock her into binding boxes or stage stupidity. I respect her sovereign sexiness and honor her independence, even as I interlock with her inner energies in such a way that I invade not her freedom in some imperial impudence, but instead embrace her in our wide open souls as I invite her into this united kingdom. She's incredible in my sight as her incisive insight incites the eye of the ignorant, putting foolishness on lockdown as she labors for the least of these. Each morn, she leaves her lair resolved to resolve wrongs in whatever way she can. Empowered and rallied by the empowering roar resounding in her from the encouragement of the ancestors. Her dedication to the struggle is like milk made for the strengthening of God's children, and so she pours of herself selflessly, then returns home to spread love and safety across the savannah. She cannot do any less. She's so strong as she meets life's test, though it's hard sometimes and causes duress. I want to be her escape route from distress, from feeling locked in and feeling oppressed. May she be renewed, Lord, and ever blessed. And may her pillow be my chest. Let her release now, and let her rest, and let her dream. For Laura dreams of locks, but I dream of Laura.
I am back. Real quick, tell the people I have your social media information in the banner at the bottom of the screen, but real quick, let the people know of any event you might have coming up in the next, 2 weeks.
Things are happening, as a matter of fact. This Friday, many of you perhaps in this area are familiar with the Maryland Writers Association. My dear friend and American University schoolmate, my undergrad AU, she goes by the name Little Pie, Patty Ross, but she goes by Little Pie. She hosts First Fridays, every first Friday for the Maryland Writers Association. She's inviting me to guest host this Friday at 7 p.m. because it's going to be a spoken word night. And we will be featuring Little Pie herself, Bernardo. Many of you in the DMV area may be familiar with Ebenezer AME Church's poetry group, headed by Sister Joy Alford and others. I shouldn't say headed, they really are a collective, they work together. Bernardo is a member of that. He will be with us. Little Pie will be featuring Patrice, and I'm not familiar with her. I look forward to meeting her, and her last name is escaping me right now, but somebody that I will be meeting through Little Pie, and I'm looking forward to hearing her. And the aforementioned awesome, fantastic, dope brother by the name of 13 of Nazareth will be featuring little small showcase sets and then a very small open mic afterwards. Go to Maryland Writers Association, marylandwritersassociation.org, and go to First Fridays tab to find out more about that. Saturday at 6 p.m., Kennedy Street Northwest. One of my extended cousins, one of my play cousins, Ife Ahmed, is the proprietor of a new bookstore called Queen Bee Book Emporium. Queen Bee Book Emporium. It's her birthday this week, and so on Saturday she's going to do a Queen Bee birthday celebration, and she wants to have the type of grown-up night for that celebration. So she's going to have a spoken word open mic, and it's going to be an adult affair, and that is at 6 p.m. This coming Saturday, June 5th, at Queen Bee Book Emporium. That's on Kennedy Street Northwest. If you look it up or if you follow my media, you will see it. I will host a love and erotica evening. So now that we spent the whole night talking about justice being my wheelhouse, I'm going to host a love and erotica because that's fun too, and it's going to be really fun considering featuring that evening is our very own Simply Sherry, the love, sexy, classy, nasty fairy herself. So y'all know what that's going to be about. Again, look at my media for that. There are things in June. I'll be featuring online for my man Dustin Nispel, his online mic called Given. You'll see info about that. And let me give you a heads up. Those of you who are in person in the Maryland area, join us in Frederick, Maryland on Juneteenth, Saturday, June 19th at Mullenix Park. I will be part of an all slate of events that day, and I will be doing a set of poetry there. As you know, Frederick is where my nephew was murdered by police, so that might be a very interesting set of poetry right there. So,
yes, so follow him on all social media to find out about all of that. So the question from Betty is, did the theologian Howard Thurman influence in any way your writing?
God, I love that question. Thank you, Betty. Interestingly enough, I don't claim to draw consciously directly from Thurman. Thurman is an undercurrent for anybody who studied at Howard Divinity. So I'm not going to say that there's no Thurman energy in what I say or write, but I will say that I did not consciously draw from Thurman in that particular way. One of my professors was the late Kane Hope Felder, dynamic professor of New Testament studies, and one or two of the things that he said have directly shown up in my poetry in one or two lines. So I might as well lift his name up while we're at it. But that's a dope question. That's a dope ass question. I like that.
Any other questions on the Q&A, Facebook, YouTube? This is your time to talk to analysis. That is a good question, Betty. I like that one.
That really is. That's right on. If our listeners are not familiar with Howard Thurman, go ahead and search him. A foundational person in the history of Howard University and in terms of Black theological and Black justice thought in this country. You know, and I draw from there are various scholars who end up in my, while we're waiting for possible questions. I mean, various writers and scholars. Sure, you hear me talk about Zen all the time. Of course, you know, what Zen brings to the table shows up. Dr. Felder and some of my other professors. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, if not by verbatim quote, in ethos or trying to draw upon knowledge, my poem, The Selling of Souls, draws heavily upon Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, among other sources, you know.
You're muted, Kaniki. I saw your lips move.
Yeah, I was just saying, wow. Nothing.
It's all right. Well, we seem to be no more questions in the chats, so we won't hold everybody. I will give Girl Genius the last question.
Oh, yeah, the infamous last, which is now that you have been officially on the show and not just sitting in the background, who would you like to see? Look at Kaniki's doing the ASL on the other end. That's hilarious. Good job, man. Good job. Who would you like to see us bring in? And you are probably only partially privy to the list. So you may know a little bit about who we have or don't have, but who would you like to see?
Yeah, I do. I'm always interested when I hear you all talk about some of the people that you're planning on. Um, you've had so many great folks, so many more to have. There's a couple of ideas. Certainly, I'd like to see D. Collin, my dear friend, D. Collin, on. I think for you, Danielle, for talk about, or from behind the microphone. I think either of those. Um, Sonny Green, many of you familiar with. He featured for me last year because we met during the pandemic. He's the host of Trouble Tongues over in London. And I think maybe for platforms, just in terms of talking about, pandemic poetry and how that survives. In the same vein, I think Rick the Most would be a great person for platforms down in Wellington, New Zealand. You all have seen me down there. I featured down there for them, and they run the slam also that I've slammed in a number of times. So I think they've done a really great job in the pandemic. We talked about Clint, especially with Clint coming out with a new book. I certainly think we ought to get Clint on. You hear me talk about. We listen to me talk
he's
about.
Definitely on the list. He's definitely on the list.
Elizabeth, it's so hard. Elizabeth stays busy, but if it's any way possible, because she got a new book out.
Yeah, I know.
Name escapes me right now, but it's hard. Both Clint and Elizabeth stay so damn busy, but God bless them both. If you can get them. I think my buddies down in South Africa, Busisiwe Mahlangu, would be great for art and therapy.
Busisiwe is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, because in terms of a survivor, when we talk about women surviving, that has a global context, and so I think she would be great for art and therapy. And her buddy and my other buddy, Mo Africa Amokhati, for platforms. She does a lot. There's a group thing, a thing called Hear Me Africa. I can't think of it, but she does that as well as she's a jazz music radio host as well.
Yeah, so, I was gonna say one of them has a radio station or a podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Mo Africa has
a podcast, has a radio station and a podcast. Yeah.
They both feature me. If you can get it, I don't know what her schedule is like these days, but certainly Stacey Ann Chin for Let's Talk, especially because their collection is out now. Let's talk about. Kat McGill has done so much in the pandemic, especially.
She's booked.
Kat's booked.
Good.
Kat's booked.
Kat's booked. This was a conversation we had last week. Kat's booked.
Good. Excellent.
And I was going to say a lot of these are really great suggestions because I'm thinking to myself, we have yet to have an international poet on this show.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
That's true.
That's what the international travel electronically during the quarantine is what has helped sustain me during the quarantine, and I love it. And meet this whole global family has been excellent, and so I definitely encourage. I'll give you one more name in that vein, Kelly Van Nelson, who is, she's English, but based in Australia for art and therapy, or even for platforms, because her book, Punch and Judy, which deals with domestic violence and survival, was in the swag bag for the Oscars this year. If you heard all the buzz about what was in the swag bag, that was the book that was in it. It's a worldwide best-selling poetry book. And so it's interesting to me that a book of domestic survival was the one chosen for the Oscar, the swag bag, for the red carpet people and everything. So I think she'd be interesting to talk with also probably for Let's Talk About. And more, and many more.
I'm about to say
Jamal. Has Jamal been on?
Who?
St. John? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. So plenty more.
Yeah. And we've got a nice extensive list already, and some more on. Like, as a matter of fact, we might as well announce the month on deck, because the month on deck is freaking ridiculous.
Yes, that video cut will drop tomorrow.
I will drop it tomorrow or first thing Tuesday morning, but probably Tuesday morning, because I was like, get through Memorial Day first, sit on this one, and then we'll drop the video for this on and the flyer for the video and the flyer for next week on Tuesday. But the month ahead is ridiculous, y'all.
Go ahead and tell. We can give y'all. So if you had a good time tonight, again, we are here every Sunday at 7 p.m. Thank you, Analysis. Danielle, Girl Genius, go ahead. You will start. I will announce Charity since she's next week, and I happen to know who it is. And the week after you.
The week after, yeah. Mm-hmm. So my segment is next week. I have Let's Talk About the Book. And I am excited because we've been trying to work on this for a while. I have B. Sharice, who just wrote who not only just wrote this really amazing young adult fantasy novel, but I believe she announced that she announced on her Facebook page that she may have had a large publisher pick this book up.
Yes, that's what I saw.
So I am super excited to pick her brain about this. If y'all are into like this is the first time we've had a fantasy. I mean, she's also a poet, but if this is the first time we've had a fantasy writer on the show. I've had a romance novelist on here. I've had plenty of poets. I've never had a fantasy author on here, so I'm excited. I actually have a surprise for her. I think I'm going to try to set this up for next week. So when she's on the show, I have something set up that'll be wonderful for her. B. Sharice Moore.
B. Sharice Moore. And the book is called The Marvelous...
Dr. Marvelous Jen.
Yes,
Odd Scholars.
Yes, and it just recently dropped. So come back next Sunday. The following Sunday for Art Plus Therapy with Charity Blackwell, we will have Megan Rickman Blackwood.
Wow. Yep. I say wow like I didn't know.
Yes. Yeah. For From Behind the Microphone, I am bringing in a musician because June is Music Month. So I am I had a plan. So I am bringing in the amazing Baltimore. Actually, everyone knows him in Baltimore, but he is an internationally known artist. His name is Mark Avon Evans. And Kaniki.
We'll be and I am bringing in for poets and platforms. Drum roll. Godchild the Omen. Yes, if you are in the 757 area, gotta know this brother has been doing things for a couple of decades now.
Yeah.
Yes. So we will ask you to please like the video, subscribe on YouTube. Over the next couple of weeks, some of the older episodes that we have, we will be filling them back in. Stick around because in July we will have our first repeat guest in July. So everyone, please, thank you again, Analysis. Thank you for all the support that you have given Keep the Mic On since we started.
Yes, sir.
We really appreciate it.
I want to thank you all. This has been fun. We've been talking about this for a while. I've been looking forward to it. But all playfulness and joking aside, it's my honor to be able to support you all because you all have put together a dynamic thing. We hear people every week talk about this ends up being a masterclass in poetry and the arts generally. And that is to the credit of the hard work that you all have done. You already know how we go. Each of you are personal friends. Each of you, my sisters, I love you all. And I really, really am honored, to have sat in the hot seat this week. It's been fun, and I really appreciate all of you and Charity and everybody who supports.
Thank you. So we will ask everyone, we will see you next Sunday, again at 7 p.m. with Let's Talk About with B. Sharice Moore. Please stay safe, wash your hands, and everyone have a safe Memorial Day. Yes. And good night.
Good night, y'all. And I'll see some of y'all tomorrow.